And we've got a great panel to dive into this conversation with. Let's do some introductions and get right to it. Jeff Rainford is with us, formerly the Chief of Staff for Mayor Francis Slay of the City of St. Louis, no longer the Chief of Staff, doing some, as you described it to me, some pro bono consulting for the Mayor's office on the stadium itself. Also, welcome back to the show, Alvin Reed with Donnybrook, of course, and also St. Louis Magazine. Tashara Jones is the treasurer of the City of St. Louis, and then Alex Enens, that's next to her, the founder and editor of nextstl.com. And I said join us because we will be drawing on heavily the hashtag you see on your screen there, hashtag stay tuned STL. Okay, guys, let's dive right in here. I mean, sticking with the relationship theme for just 1 minute, are we just not getting the hint here from Stan Kroenke and the Rams? Is there any way that they're actually staying in St. Louis? Do we need to kind of deal with the reality that this team is gone?
Well, I think that we don't know the reality. I don't think the commissioner of football knows the reality. I don't think the owners know what's going to happen. And there are a lot of different possibilities. I would grant you that the least likely possibility seems to be the St. Louis Rams staying in St. Louis with Stan Kroenke as the owner. But the St. Louis Rams staying in St. Louis with a different owner, a different team coming here, even an expansion franchise, are all possibilities. I mean, you talk to Dave Peacock and the task force. Obviously, they're talking to NFL owners, to the NFL front office. And there are a lot of different permutations that can happen if we show up, with a viable plan to build the stadium. There's only one scenario where we know with certitude what will happen, and that is if we don't show up with a viable plan to build the stadium, and that is St. Louis will not have NFL football. That's the only certainty that we know.
So are we building it and hoping we'll get a team?
No. I guess that we, for 3 years we've been saying that unless an NFL team signs a 30-year lease, unless the NFL, a team, and the fans put up $600 million, and unless, we are satisfied with all of that, there will not be a stadium. So this is not like the last time, and I get that people have a hard time, forgetting history. The last time, 20 years ago, St. Louis built a stadium hoping to get a team. This is a much, much different, much, much better, much, much better deal, I think, being driven by the mayor, by the governor, and that is there will not be a stadium. We will not move one shovelful of dirt unless there's $600 million in a 30-year lease signed by a team.
My concern is this, and I agree with everything you say. Now, whether or not the Rams leave or stay, I think one certainty is that Stan Kroenke is going to build a stadium in Los Angeles. And I think that is what's driving the fact that he wants to move the franchise there. I don't think he is waiting for them to do anything for him. He's going to build a stadium. He wants to move his franchise there. I understand that. The concern I have is with the National Football League. And this entity that is the National Football League, to rely on them to back up whatever promises they're saying, or we keep hearing they're saying you're doing good work and all that. Until we have a promise from the National Football League written down that they are going to have a franchise in St. Louis, and I don't know what the years, are in 30. In 5 years you'll have a team. In 10 years you'll have a team. If the Rams leave within this parameter of time, you will have a franchise. Then I said, let's go. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's pay people to do work as we are now, and I think that's the people's money too. And I just don't trust the National Football League to do right by the city of St. Louis. I think it's the same league that we're bitter with most of the time, but for some reason we're putting our faith in the National Football League. And that kind of concerns me. And I will also say this. I thought that the task force, when I say played the city of St. Louis cheap, I just think that it would have passed. I think with any effort whatsoever, true effort, I think the people of the city of St. Louis would have passed it.
Had spending public money gone to a public vote?
Oh, there's no doubt it would have passed. I'm convinced it would have passed too. Right. I do want to address one issue.
That's easy to say now, just for the record.
No, I think it.
Because the judge just
well, I've seen. I guess I've had the benefit of polling data. I know what people think. I've had the benefit of understanding things about what people like about football. Football is America's national pastime. People love football. Tonight is an example. More St. Louisans will watch a team from Boston play a team from Pittsburgh than any other television program in St. Louis. When the Cardinals were in the World Series, and I'm a baseball fan, not a football fan. I'm a baseball fan. But when the Cardinals were in the World Series in 2013, fewer St. Louisans watched the World Series that year than watched the Super Bowl in years when there's no St. Louis team in it. The reason we want to do this is not for the NFL, it is not for Stan Kroenke, it's for people of St. Louis, a majority of whom either like football, love football, or are grossly fanatical about football, and that's the reason to do it. And as far as trusting the NFL, I can't disagree with what you said. However, I want to make it abundantly clear, there is no stadium. We don't move one shovel full of dirt until they show up with their $600 million.
I think part of the rhetoric around this, and that football's just big and we love it, and you can do TV ratings and things like that, but if the team leaves, we have 2.8 million people here. We're a huge economic engine with or without the NFL, and cities that have the NFL because they're an economic engine. And part of what we saw in the intro was that we are an NFL city. By every economic measure, we're a middle-of-the-road economic city. There's no reason why Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Buffalo, Green Bay have teams and we wouldn't. So it's hard to imagine if an economic package is put together by St. Louis that the NFL would walk. And we don't have much of a reason to trust them. But they're getting to the end of this game where they've shuffled teams around and left LA open. And now they have 3 teams that are out of leases, that have old stadiums. This is kind of the last play for a decade or more of this round robin kind of threats of relocation. So it's hard to imagine them leaving St. Louis. But what I've been interested in is kind of that how do we sell this to people, right? And there are all kinds of different ways to look at it. But I think the bombast that goes behind it sometimes is the pride and stuff. It's worth quantifying that and really understanding what's at risk.
So there is one set of economists who did quantify, not the pride factor, but quantified football as an amenity. So you would admit, we've all said it before, if the weather in St. Louis all year round was like it was today, our homes would be worth more. And in fact, there are economists who've quantified that. 2 economists have quantified having an NFL team increases your residential property values by 8%. Okay, so it is an amenity. Now, can you bank that? No, I'm not claiming that. What I'm claiming is there is a value.
There's an economic argument to make. Absolutely.
That's economics. I'm saying there is an absolute emotional value. I've heard economists who say, oh, well, if people weren't going to football games, they'd go to Tiddlywink matches or whatever. Like there's an equivalence.
Or movies
there.
or baseball or hockey or something like that.
People want football in big cities.
I think we just have to be careful when you say
amenity.
there's an emotional value. I think there's an inherent idea there that there's a money. Like we don't say value without thinking there's a real impact. And economists measure real impact. And so when you say emotional value, inherent in that is some kind of like, it's emotional, but it really matters. But how? Other than just,
but it's like a church. If you
it.
ask an economist, is it worth building churches? Because churches get tax breaks, right? Is it worth it? They would do the same study and say it's not. And then if you say, well, what about it being a place where people can go to pray to God?
Well,
that's an intangible.
That's an intangible. Churches, though.
Well, no, but we give them tax breaks to do it. They're not-profits. And we subsidize it. And we subsidize it.
Well, and we subsidize corporations.
But what an economist would say,
roads and everything else that we enjoy.
But what economists would say is, well, that's probably not worth it. And then you would say, well, what about the fact that you're building places where people can go to pray to God? Well, that's an intangible. Yeah. What's the whole reason for building a church?
But that doesn't really make sense.
But the whole reason to build a stadium is so people can have football. That's the reason to do it. And when they say, well, we can't measure that, you're measuring the
This is the problem. If you're giving a sales pitch and saying the reason to build this is to allow people to buy personal seat licenses for $40,000, then allowing people to buy tickets for $200, you're talking about a tiny sliver of St. Louis, and that's not hitting
everyone. It's watching them on television. It's listening to the radio. It's calling on 101 and arguing about it. It's reading blogs, writing blogs, Twittering, Facebook, and fantasy leagues. It's all of it. As a matter of fact,
people do that in cities without the NFL.
But wait, I was hurt when I lived in Washington D.C. Okay, I was in D.C. and I'm sorry. When I was in D.C. Okay, St. Louis was going to get a team. It was going to be the St. Louis Stallions, and I'm sitting by the radio in Washington D.C. waiting for them to announce that the St. Louis Stallions would be the franchise that was coming to St. Louis, and they said Jacksonville, and I was crushed, and I didn't even live here. Okay, now that was a real feeling I had. Right. All right. Now, I moved here in 1995, and the Rams moved here. The same day I moved back from the East Coast was the day they signed the deal for the Rams to come here. Immense pride, okay? Now, is that got some kind of financial value to it? I don't know, but I'll tell you what, it made it a better place for me to be moving to, even though I was from here.
So does the Treasurer's Office have a concern? Does the Treasurer's Office worry about these millionaire players leaving town, or this large corporation you could see leaving town? Are you concerned about the Rams?
So Personally, I'm not concerned about the Rams leaving town. St. Louis has 99 problems, and a stadium isn't one, in my personal opinion. We have a whole host of things that I think we need to fix before even being concerned about whether the Rams stay or go. For example, our school district is teetering on the edge of provisional accreditation, and so are all the other 22 school districts that surround the city. We have economic inequality that, you know, there's double-digit unemployment in minority communities. I think that, you know, we need to use an old cliche, take care of home first before we start talking about a stadium that most of the people who live in the city can't even afford to go to the games. And Alex he touched on this really briefly. There are cities around the country who don't have NFL teams that are flourishing. Portland, Austin, San Antonio, just to name a few. And what are those cities doing? And maybe we can duplicate their efforts to make St. Louis a better place. But St. Louis is a baseball city and a hockey city, as far as I'm concerned.
You can't duplicate the weather, though. See, that's the whole thing with Texas.
Minneapolis is succeeding. It's not because
Minneapolis
they have
has a
an
football
NFL team,
a hockey team, and a basketball team, and has one of the most vibrant college athletic programs in the United States of America.
You're talking about the
hockey
Gophers?
team. Yes, I am. So, I mean, Minneapolis has got a lot more going on than we do.
So here's what Joe Buck said. Obviously, Joe Buck, we don't have to refer to him as Jack Buck's son anymore. He's a famous broadcaster in his own right, but he's been very vocal on Twitter. He says, in his opinion, take the NFL out of STL, and our downtown has no impetus for change. Indy and Cincy have passed us by.
I agree with a lot of what he's been saying in the last few weeks. I do not agree with that. I do think that building the stadium on the riverfront will matter a lot to Laclede's Landing and will matter a lot to the eastern part of downtown. But we got a lot going on with City Arch River and National Geospatial, which is being proposed, and some of the other things. I don't think you build it. I think that is an advantage, the redevelopment of the riverfront, and I think that's a positive. But I don't agree with what he just said there. One of the things he did say, agree with him though, is St. Louis has suffered a lot of body blows in the last year, and whether you like football or not, and not everybody likes football, and I'll grant that. And the polling I've seen, it makes it really clear. If you don't like football, you don't really care whether we have a team or not. If you like football, you won to build the stadium. But the fact of the matter is we've suffered a lot of body blows, and if we lose this franchise, whether it's through our own fault or through the NFL's fault, it'll be another kick in the pants for St. Louis.
Some
and I agree with him.
Some say body blows, some say opportunity to lead the nation on having some honest conversations that we've been avoiding for decades. I mean, is it tone deaf to be putting all of our
It's not all of it. It's not all of it at all. And I want to respond to what Tashara said. Of course, we're doing much more than a football team. Let me just say this. A football team will neither solve the problems of Ferguson, speaking metaphorically, nor will it exasperate them. It is a separate thing. The revenue is separate. The revenue from the stadium, the new stadium for the city, because we're only going to be 15% of the deal, we'll end up covering it. The Rams move, we lose it. It's a wash probably one way or the other. But you can do more than one thing. The mayor has announced about 10 different initiatives, including a civilian review board. He's expanding charter schools. And when we talk about education, we have the only municipal affordable housing commission. Our police department is doing a lot of the things that the Ferguson Commission is already recommending. We can do more than one thing in this community. We can build City Arch River. We can do National Geospatial. We can do the stadium, and we can address those issues.